Hello and welcome to a special episode of the ASEF Podcast, which we're recording live at one of the coolest technology events of the region, Dragon Days in Celje. I'm delighted to welcome two guests joining us tonight. Michael Stucky, a partner at Serpentine Ventures, as well as coach and mentor of young entrepreneurs and spin-off companies visiting Slovenia from Switzerland, and Jure Vindišar, head of technology transfer at the National Institute of Biology. Today's topic is technology transfer, and since I'm joined by two experts in the field, I'll ask you to set a foundation for our conversation. So maybe, Michael, you can just briefly start and tell us what is exactly technology transfer, and most importantly, what excites you guys about it?
Technology transfer is basically, bringing an idea, an invention, IP that comes from a lab at a research institution to the market. Very simple definition of that. And then you've got a lot of shades of gray, but in essence, it's really from an idea, from an invention to a product, a solution that hits the market and can be commercialized.
Let me just answer your question a little different way. What actually tech transfer expert do, to answer in first person? So basically, I'm working in the field for last 7 years. So basically, it was like almost not brownfield, but greenfield situation for me. And I realized that basically we're kind of brokers. We are here in the crossroad between researchers, industry, VCs, or whoever finds the application. And that's the for me, a great motivation, a challenge to be the one who actually is required to see a big picture and then make it or help to make an impact out of it.
Okay, thank you. So, Jure, you're the head of technology transfer at the National Institute of Biology. Maybe, Jure, if you can share a story or two from your institution, and also maybe mention some active organizations in Slovenia, maybe Ljubljana, and then we'll move to Michael, and maybe we can compare the two regions.
I believe in Slovenia we have really good foundations to perform a good tech transfer. Good foundations, I mean, we have a lot of enthusiastic people driving the ecosystem. We are growing on the field of financiers. Just recently, there was a big 40 million euro Vesna founded. That's basically focused on the tech transfer from the research institutions in the region, Slovenia and Croatia.
Just to jump in, we hosted one of the partners from the Vesna in our previous podcast about Slovenian VCs. Continue, please.
Yeah, and this was to mention this was kind of public-private partnership. So basically, also the government obviously showed the interest to do something on the field. That was point one. Regarding the support to the researchers, we have now since I think 2012, the government supports the tech transfer offices around the research institutions, universities. And that is a great benefit for all of us. Having in mind that we are rather small institutions comparing to, US or even European institutions, we are rather more small institute universities. And being able to bring research, guys working in the tech transfer office together, that's a big deal. So we can talk to each other, we can exchange ideas and do the better job.
Can you mention a few of these institutions that have knowledge transfer departments in Slovenia?
Yeah, to be honest, now almost, I know for 13 or 14 are now around. So basically 3 major universities, University of Ljubljana, University of Maribor, University of Primorska. And then we have a range of, 10 or 11 different institutes. Josef Stefan Institute is the biggest one. They were basically, they have really good operating tech transfer office, but that's because they were big as such. They have like 1,000 people employed. But as our other institutes are rather small, for example, National Institute of Biology is third by size, and we're like 200. And then the other even smaller. It's really difficult to get this critical mass of the support in one place. So government supporting this tech transfer consortium, it's really enabling us to do our job better. Regarding to some good cases, At the National Institute of Biology, we just set up a second spin-out 2 years ago on the field of biotech. It was really, it doesn't happen overnight. It was basically really, it was, I would say, a startup with a vision of an ex-head of the biotech department, now director of the institute, Ms. Maja Ravnikar. At that time, they realized they have really good expertise on virus analytics, and they work with a range of big pharma companies and small startups. And then somehow they came together with the company of Axis. They were developing a certain drug for gene therapy, and then for this exact drug, the Avexis was acquired by Novartis for 7 billion euro at that time, 2019. And this is the story we really like to share, to show a little bit of impact. I mean, we didn't develop the drug; we are like one little part in the story. But this was really a kind of big impact we did. And now we have this spin out called Niba Labs, and they're doing well. I mean, they're now becoming a global company on the field.
Thank you, Michael. You founded a couple university spin-outs yourself. May perhaps guide us on a journey of what that was like and what you're up to these days.
Yes, actually, it's a great segue to combine a little bit of the history of tech transfer at ETH in Zurich, because I was fortunate enough to co-found a biotech company in 2004. And back then, the tech transfer office at ETH was probably 2, maybe 3 people. You had the head and the deputy head. And we were negotiating the first licensing agreement with these 2 guys. So it took us almost 12 months, not because they didn't do a good job. They did actually quite a fantastic job, but just they were overwhelmed. You know, it's not just us. They had to deal with other startups. And what we also tend to forget is that tech transfer offices are, you know, their job is also to commercialize and monetize IP in general. So spin-outs are one ways, but then you also have corporates, right? So that also takes a long time, and actually quite even more long. So that took us 10 to 12 months until we had that licensing agreement. You could see that it was still a bit of trial and error from both ends, because we were also very new to this game, right? That was our first company. So you have 2 newbies at a table, and that doesn't help the process. Fast forward, 2019, again, fortunate enough to start another ETH spin out.
Sorry, just for context, when was the first one?
That was 2004.
Okay.
And 15 years later, 2019, started the second ETH spin out, complete different field. The tech transfer office, still led by the 2 same guys, has now 25 people, much more specialized. And it took us probably 4 months from the day we started negotiating until we had a signature. Still probably relatively long. Nevertheless, we cut the time in 3. So that shows a little bit what I was alluding earlier, is really this professionalization of tech transfer. Not just from a academic view, but really bringing people who have industry experience, have been founders themselves, and just the fact that these guys also had 15 years of experience and several hundred deals that they negotiated over that period of time. And that, you know, you could feel that. And I think if you compare that to what you see in other places like the US, where there I would say it's very commercially driven. These people make a lot of money. They're also, you know, paid by kind of the commission. I believe that what ETH has done over the last 15 years is a good balance between being commercially motivated, but still being very supportive of the spin-outs, and hence helping to create that ecosystem that was probably quite small and quite passive 20 years ago.
So before we move on to like more the global perspective, which you kind of hinted at right now, can we maybe compare the Slovenian tech transfer ecosystem and the Swiss one. So you mentioned you kind of witnessed this journey from 2004 to today, 2024, so like 20 years. And you also have some experience in the Slovenian ecosystem, right? So you've, I think Jure mentioned before our conversation that you collaborated actually on one of the tenders that's being a part of the National Biological Institute. So maybe you can shed some light on like where Slovenia is right now. Maybe Jure, how has it been developing over time and so on?
Yeah, I can say Michael was the evaluator of our first proof of concept, internal NIB proof of concept found. And that was kind of, it was the first one for us. So we're also newbies on this field. And for me, it was really interesting to monitor all the process, in particular how the researchers react on this, because this was something new. We have like 100,000 euro on the table, and we would like to select the most promising project to go up to tier tier 3 or tier 4. And it was a kind of interesting experience, even when we set up the rules. And even after the end of evaluation, I mean, I haven't talked to Michael about it yet, but it was really the response of the results of it was also, I would say, interesting, because everyone is learning. I'm learning because the entity officers and also researchers are basically learning. I guess a lot of them, they didn't even realize what is going on, what it's all about, and then now it's about a month or two after the end of the results. And then some researchers came to me and they just told me that it was an eye-opener. So they said, oh, I mean, it was the first time I have to work with SWOT analysis. It was the first time I have to work with business canvas. But from now, I mean, I have to search Google what it is. But from now on, I will use it on every project application. It's basically totally cool and it's something new. And then they even do a step back. So what are they doing? Why are they doing? And so on. So yeah, we are. You're talking about the Slovenian TTO system at the NIB. We are at this stage, so we have like first one. At other institutes, they have this before, but in general, Slovenian ecosystem is, from the research perspective, is more or less on this level at the moment.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be invited to the jury of this or evaluation board of this first batch, and what impressed me was the quality, of some of these applications. And I have to say, this is what I've seen. This is the third time I'm in Slovenia now. And I'm very impressed by the level of education, by the quality of the founders, both in terms of what they bring to the table in terms of scientific, technological background, but also the entrepreneurial mindset. At least the few I met personally, I was really impressed. And I think where there are lots of similarities is two small countries. We rely a lot on human resources, and education is fundamental. So I think that's where the starting point is probably similar. And when I was alluding to this 20 years, this is maybe the advantage that we have in Switzerland, is that we started that 20 plus years ago. And the learning process was quite a long one. We have, state-owned universities, so it's hard to innovate. And what I have seen over the last 20 years is really this driving force of the entrepreneurs themselves being the pushy ones, asking the TT to be faster, to come up with maybe standardized contracts, and realizing, of course, that all the startups are different, nevertheless, just to game them. And I think that's a very healthy cohabitation, having entrepreneurs, who have a clear vision and you want to go fast. And of course, the academic world that, goes at a different pace. And I think that's a very important element to keep in mind, to make sure that these two worlds interact. And I see very good potential for Slovenia to go the same route. And if you piggyback on, best practices, you might do what we did in 20 years, maybe in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Your job, Jure, now.
To zoom in just a little bit. So what is the typical negotiation process of, let's say, creating a university spin out, or is it similar to also maybe licensing the technology? I don't know. What does it look like, and like what does the university get? What do the researchers get?
We talk a lot about the people, and I think the team is really critical. So on our side, we have to secure that the researchers will be involved when the investor came and have this idea of the startup, that the researchers are involved. For example, and this is absolutely I think the hardest part. I mean, we always talk that the researchers, they feel very comfortable in their research world, but when they have an opportunity to go out to commercialize their results, I mean, they're really enthusiastic at the beginning, but then when they see that it also means to spend some more time on the market, then sometimes they rethink the whole situation. So, for example, in the last spin out I mentioned, Niba Labs, we have a really good agreement that I think 2 or 3 researchers are partly employed now in this startup. So basically, the investor secure that also the knowledge will be there. It's not that just we do the licensing contract and that's it. End of story. Give me money. I give you my knowledge. But basically, they get the researchers, and this is really the most important driving force. But then when you come to technical details, I mean, we have now one licensing contract open, I think, for more than 12 months, and it sometimes takes time. Yeah.
Clearly, I think the driving force, and now we're focusing on tech transfer for startups, is the future founders, i.e. the researchers who really want to make this happen. And very often what I see, at least at ETH, in 80% of the cases, you have faculty members, a professor that is very helpful, supportive. That doesn't mean that he or she wants to be involved, but they will be, the first ones to say, yeah, go for it. Because this is at the end of the day what will make the difference. Whether the founders will stay on forever, that's a different story. Startups go through a cycle, and in deep tech, and we're talking mostly about deep tech now, the journey can be very long. People change. Not everyone is made to start a company and then run it for the next 5, 7, 20 years. So it's actually a normal process, but very, very important. At the beginning, you need to have motivated researchers that are willing to go the extra mile, not just at the lab, but also be willing to, go out, talk to potential customers, even in the biotech field. I mean, that may take 15 years until a drug is commercialized, and most probably the startup won't do that. It's going to be a big pharma that will do that eventually. But still, you need to have people who are willing to do this, who accept the fact that even if you are brilliant, even if your solution is absolutely brilliant, you will still have, to do the job yourself. And I think that's the very, very important, crucial part, is that you have these people who actually want to make this happen. Without that, you can have the best tech transfer in the world. This is not going to work.
Yeah. What I'm seeing now is that the big issue is the assessment of researchers, meaning what can have an influence on their career, what's the basic incentive for them to become you said before science-preneurs,
yes.
Right? Yeah. So and that's really an issue. So if you go outside your lab, you can fail, right? It's a risk. I mean, it's quite a big risk, and you will probably fail. I mean, it's the fact. Yeah, it is a fact. At least the first time. It doesn't mean that you will. I mean, your chance to succeed the second, third time is bigger. And I see it that way. So we have to make an environment that this scientist that will maybe fail for the first time, and he will come back to the lab. He will not be seen as a loser, but he should be seen as a successful, ambitious guy. But to do this, we need to make some, I would call it really politically correct, some systemic changes. And it takes time, but it's going on. I think it's Europe realized that. I mean, this is one part how to make Europe more competitive, more innovative, and so on, and to think about it, how to evaluate researchers not just by their academic achievements, but also but these tech transfer achievements, and to cherish them, to support them, and to give them applause, even if they come back unsuccessful.
Yeah, and in my view, TTOs, tech transfer offices, should be enablers. They should be facilitators, but they should be critical. And when I say critical, there's of course the scientific part, publications, how strong can the patent be? But they should also be able to evaluate what I said before. Are these the right people to drive that project, right? And also to evaluate a little bit on the market side. I think this is where probably, and I speak about ETH again, I was in similar committees for 6-7 years, and the evolution there was clearly at the beginning, they put a lot of emphasis on scientific excellence, right? Great patents, super research, and in my opinion, way too little emphasis on the team, and also on, is there a market out there? Because at the end of the day, again, you can have a fantastic technology, but if there is no market, it's just not going to be a good use of resources. So I think that has dramatically improved over the last 6-7 years. The professors realized that, yes, science is important, but the rest is also very important when you start evaluating, IP and technology that needs to be transferred.
I can add to that if you go back, what is needed to have a successful TTO system? I always say in Slovenia we put 2 letters I for innovation in our 2, I would say, major stakeholders. One is the research agency that basically give the money to the researchers. It was called the Slovenian Research Agency before. Now it's Agency for Research and Innovation. And the other one is the Ministry of Science, that is now Ministry for Science and Innovation. Okay, it's just another letter in a name, but slowly it's changing. It started with the word I said, and then the ecosystem is changing. Much more money will go to so-called innovation projects. So basically market-driven, industry-driven, or market-orientated projects. So that's something that it's also Slovenia on, I think, really good way. It will not happen overnight, but on the other hand, I think we don't have so many nights to spend as well. So we really have to do it really fast.
You also alluded to the process, right? And let me maybe speak a few words about that. Again, having been on both sides of the table and now being an investor, I also sometimes advise some of the startups on how to negotiate. So also there, I think Slovenia has the advantage of being able to learn from other places, not to copy, but just to get best practices. What took ETH quite some time was to realize that it's okay to challenge these founders and tell them, look, this is the first time to negotiate. It's good that you learn that with us, but that's to a certain extent. I think I'm a big fan of being able to put the criteria on the website, being very transparent. And of course, it's a range. You cannot say, okay, it's 2%, 7%, but having a range so that, future founders know more or less what they have to expect. And then at the end of the day, it's relatively simple, right? You've got maybe some equity, however you want to do that through, options, direct investments, phantom stock options, and then you have royalties, and you have sub-licensing. So it's relatively simple in terms of how to structure that. And then you need some templates. And of course, a biotech startup is going to be completely different from a software startup or engineering. And that's absolutely normal. But I believe that the tech transfer offices, at least the ones I know, could do a bit of a better job at becoming a little bit more pragmatic and transparent. That would save time and money on both sides.
And you also mentioned the specializations, so like, software, biotech. and chemistry, for example, have different kind of needs. And all of these are kind of elements of a more mature ecosystem of knowledge transfer. So maybe let's zoom out a little bit. We've been talking about Slovenia and Switzerland as I guess you guys are the two representatives today in this, but you also both have experience from the US or from North America, to be more general. Jure, you were a part of a knowledge exchange delegation to the USA last year, where actually we met also in San Francisco when I was also doing my research exchange at Berkeley. So please tell us, what did you experience? Where did you go? What did you learn?
Yeah, these were my 14 days condensed experience of American US TTO environment. I said before how our government is trying to do something on the field. But the interesting thing is that our embassy also realized that this is something that there is a big potential in Slovenia, and then they can help on that. So they supported us. They bring, I think, 8 or 9 of us on a trip from east to west coast. It was full of knowledge, full of exchange, full of good practices. I usually when I go out and then get and realize something new, I digest it in a month or two, but it is almost a year since we've been there, and I'm still thinking about what we saw and what was it. So basically, what we did was they really make a great program, and we see all the levels, I would say, of the TTO system in the States. Basically, in Washington, they explain how the government supported, how it developed since Bayh-Dole Act in 1980. How they support is public-private partnership, which is not taken for granted in Slovenia, still is not. How the TTOs are not the commercialization arm of the universities, but they transfer the knowledge to the industry, and they do it. Then if I go further west, we stop in Colorado. We were there of a few places, and University of Colorado was, for me, the best place to learn how they do the tech transfer. They're much bigger. They're I don't know. They're really successful even in the US terms and so on. But we cannot copy them, obviously. But we have so many good practices we can take for them. And then we finished in the Bay Area, Stanford. We visited Jure Vindišar, a Slovenian researchers and entrepreneur working there.
And also founder of ASEF, the podcast for all.
Exactly. And another very interesting thing was we visited their Danish consulate. Basically, Danish consulate in San Francisco is part of their science diplomacy network. It's called the Danish Innovation Center. So that was something really interesting for us. I mean, we have also represented from the government, and basically interesting for them more than for me. But we see there a good practice how the Danish government supports the tech transfer, bringing their guys to San Francisco. So it was but it is not the end. I mean, it is not the end. I can say that in 14 days we will have here a visit from a tech transfer expert from Colorado University. He will be there. He will be here for 2 weeks, and then we will even do some more projects together. So just to find ways to transfer good practices, good stories, good examples to Slovenia, and that was intended for the whole. I would say the TTOs in Slovenia.
Michael, you also spent some of your early career days working in North America. I think that was more in finance than technology transfer, if I'm not mistaken. But do you still have any contact with the US kind of mindset, let's say, working with innovation, maybe seeing what the more mature tech transfer ecosystems are doing?
So yeah, back in my old days, I used to be a banker and spent some time in Canada, and then moved to the US, and actually was fortunate enough to go to Stanford. Lived in Silicon Valley for almost 4 years. And I think what we need to just realize is that, talking about Stanford now, but you can take Harvard and some of these top universities, they're private universities. So their mandate there at the tech transfer office is a different one, right? In Switzerland, the law for the Federal Institute of Technology like ETH in Zurich and the one in Lausanne is research, teaching, but also technology transfer. So, and they're funded by taxpayers' money. So they have a mandate to support tech transfer also through spin-outs. In the US, it's a business, right? These private universities, they want to make money. And this is why you have tech transfers experts there who are making big time money. Whereas you compare that to, Switzerland, where you make good salaries, it's a fraction of what these people can make. So it's a different mindset. Nevertheless, just the sheer amount of great talent and the fact that they have such a large market makes it still very attractive for entrepreneur to probably have more stringent and probably higher numbers in terms of equity that they have to give up, but also in terms of royalties, just because the exit potential is so much bigger. But it's a different setup. If you compare it again, I'm talking about these private universities that everyone wants to go to, and the ones we have in Switzerland, where you have a clear mandate from the taxpayers and the money to support that. So I think what we can learn is being professional. I think this is what happened over the last 20 years, and I give a lot of credit to Silvio Bonaccio, who was the head of the TTO at ETH, to actually make this out of the greenfield. You mentioned Jure Greenfield. This is exactly what he did, and he took some inspiration from MIT, from Stanford, trying to get really professional people in the team, and that's also where I think exchange within universities and ecosystem is absolutely important. And this is why I think it's a great thing that Slovenia supports these exchanges at that level.
I think that's also a good note. You can't take Silicon Valley and transplant it to Europe. That's never going to work, right? So it's amazing and great to learn among all of these fields. And I guess also every kind of place, every country, every cluster, like university, the ecosystem has their own specifics. Okay, maybe returning back to Europe a little bit. As at the time of recording this episode, 4 days ago, Mario Draghi, the former Prime Minister of Italy and the ex-president of the European Central Bank, released a report titled Competitiveness. I don't think it's unfair to say that it's been a bit ground shaking in the community. And basically in his 400-page report, and there's a condensed version that's only 60 pages, Draghi kind of recommends how to finance and coordinate Europe's policies to avoid being left behind on the global stage. He also mentions that Europe needs to mobilize at least 800 billion a year to keep pace with competitors such as the US and China. And he talks a lot about innovation, the importance of innovation clusters, and the commercialization of patented inventions in Europe. We've talked a little bit about the report prior to recording this episode. Do you guys have any thoughts on his comments on the findings of this report?
I'm on page 322 now. No, jokes aside, again, it says everything, right? A condensed version is 60 pages. So I believe that's one of the issues we have in Europe, is that we've got these politicians coming out with, these grand schemes and plans. And in essence, if you read or you get the main points, it's everything that's been known for a very long time. So I think putting politics or politicians and governments in charge of doing that is the wrong way. What I think governments and politicians should do is make sure that you have a regulatory environment that is, known, that is versatile, that is adjustable to innovation, and let, academia, finance, the market do the rest. And I think that's one of the crucial advantages that the US had when they started their ecosystems, that they had this fundamental difference between what should the governing body do, setting the ground rules, and then let the market play. And I think in Europe, one of the big problem is that we try to give or have governments intervene way too much into these things, and then you end up with 400 pages of reports.
If I add this, it was not absolutely not a surprise for me. I to be honest, I really haven't read it, and I don't think I will read it. It's like, it's like something, the sooner or later this will come. I mean, the way we act, the way we do it, it was no other way than to the innovation and the competitive advantage of the Europe used to have will sometimes end if you don't make a change, and this change haven't been done. Comparing to the China or the United States, I see it like, when a thunderstorm comes and there is the flooding, the next day they will find a solution how to do the rivers to flow in their beds again, and then all the measures they need. But then when we lose this innovation capacity, it goes slowly, really slowly, and nobody really takes care of it. The politicians, they have like 4 or 6 years mandate, and just like it's like a climate change. Nobody really cares about it because it's not my problem right now. And just on top of that, I've been monitoring how the Europe is spending research money for the last 15 years. And the Horizon program is one of the biggest program platform for funding the research. Now it's like worth of 100 billion euro per 7 years.
So that's a European-based fund, or
European-based fund. European Commission is the one who's giving the money and then divide the money for the research. And they make this 7-year program, and the program is, as I said, more or less 100 billion euro. But back in 2000, whenever this program started, they realized, they spend this money, but they don't really monitor where they don't have any evaluation. They don't monitor where this money goes to. But then they said, okay, we will change it. We have to do it industry driven. And it was really nice, industry driven. Then they spent another 100 billion euro next 7 years. And the change didn't happen. So now we are in this situation that we really have to do something different.
So what I kind of take from this is it's a pretty complex problem, right? You can't just, I guess, throw money at the problem necessarily. You have to kind of solve some more root causes, for example. Maybe we can have a more general discussion about some of these topics or like some of these issues. So the way I see it, there are some, so like the general topics are cultural aspects, education, financial aspects, legislative, and then kind of ecosystemic, tying it all together. Maybe we can speak about education a little bit. So you mentioned, let's say, science entrepreneurs, right? Or some
science-preneurs?
Science-preneurs, exactly, yeah. And you said, Jure, before, I think that some of these researchers, they might not have the skill set to, let's say, make a company just because they're a researcher, they're highly educated, they have a PhD. Maybe they don't have the full skill set. And so maybe they need to partner with somebody who's either more from the business side, or they should also learn some of these business skills. What are your perspectives on that?
Absolutely, it helps if they learn something. It can start in high school, at least when they do their PhD or something like that. I know that I when I was doing my master thesis program on mechanical engineering, it was the first time I was taught about what IP is, intellectual property, but I think this program was cancelled afterwards, and I don't think they learned about it. So it can help absolutely. But as I said, it's not the only thing. The researchers, they have to be motivated. We have to find incentives for them to step outside their research, and this is something that has to be done by decision makers. Absolutely.
Little anecdote: when we were fortunate enough that the biotech company was acquired by GSK in early 2015. Which in itself is a success, right? And I think they paid a little over $200 million at that time. And the university, TH, didn't think that this was first page news. I remember I had to talk to them, and I was employed by ETH back then, said, guys, what do you need in terms of exit? Is it 1 billion? Is it 10 billion? This is amazing. So I think that's, again, a European issue. We should celebrate the successes way more, have these role models, and just say, this is also why we will be able to attract top talents, because we can show that people studying at ETH, for example, also faculty being attracted to ETH because of successful entrepreneurial stories. And the tendency was more to say, well, it's not research, it's not a gray paper, so yeah, it's interesting, but we're not going to make a very special announcement. That has changed since. We're getting a little bit more open about that, but I think that's one of the fundamental issues that we have, is that we don't celebrate that enough. And of course, then for a young, we had that conversation on the roundtable, is to say, well, how do you motivate young scientists and researchers to start companies? It's by showing that this is a great choice of career. You can have a huge impact. You may fail, right? And Jure, you were saying that earlier, we need to accept failure, and that's fine, right? This is part of an entrepreneurial journey. And I think that's where scientists are actually really good, because they fail a lot in the lab, right? An experiment. I'm not a scientist myself, but I saw how my co-founder for years was struggling. And he said, I shouldn't have embarked on this journey. It's horrible, right? But eventually he made it. And I think this is what makes these science-preneurs actually really good entrepreneurs, because they don't take no for an answer. And I think that's a very important trait for entrepreneurs.
So yeah, you've spoken well about also the cultural aspects, right? So both in the kind of personal and maybe national culture, let's say. So I think, basically for entrepreneur, you need to be okay with risk, right? To be successful. But also in the institutional sense, I've heard stories of researchers maybe trying to pitch a spin-out company and being told that, well, that's not in the primary motives of the institute or the university, right? So I think these are also very important. It's not just like the money, just the education, whatever. It's also very deeply rooted in the culture. Maybe we can still briefly speak about the financial kind of parts of the ecosystem. So I think, Michael, you have some experience with this. I think you said back there on stage that you tried to raise a pan-European deep tech fund. Maybe you can tell some words about that.
Yeah, and again, I think the basic idea, and that was not my idea, I have to say, was to have 4 universities in Europe, ETH, Politecnico Milano, TU Delft, and RWTH in Aachen, come together and say, let's be the conduit of a deep tech fund that is focused solely on Europe. I mean, it would not be exclusive for these 4, but that have been at the core of that project. And interestingly enough, when we went out to pitch the idea, because, there are lots of reports saying, if you want to do this, you need at least 250 million euros, better 3 plus, right? And I remember pitching that to some of my American friends. I said, oh, this is great. Finally, you get it in Europe, right? This is what's missing. We had the dialogue in Europe. The first thing was to say, well, but first-time team, first-time fund, and it's way too big. Why don't you start with a 50 million fund? So that shows you a little bit the attitude, and obviously, probably the wrong person, maybe wrong timing. Nevertheless, I remain convinced that Europe needs projects like that, and eventually it's going to happen. And again, it should be professional venture capitalists or investors doing this, and not the EIF, right? That's probably the wrong way to allocate the money.
I think in Europe, and this is also coming from speaking to venture capitalists in the previous episode, it seems that venture capital is not as an attractive of a asset class in Europe as it is maybe perhaps in the US. So I think we also heard some words about this on stage, about pension funds in Europe not really investing in VC and mostly sticking to some other asset classes. Why do you think that is?
It's interesting because when you the frustrating part is there is a lot of data out there, mainly from the US. But if you look at endowment funds, for example, in the US that invested into venture capital in the late 60s, right, early 70s, they've done very, very well. Again, they had other asset classes, but their private market exposure, and that's not just venture capital, private market went up to 35% of the whole portfolio. And they did really well, right? Of course, you've got the bad years and you will always have that, but that you got that at the stock market as well. You got that on fixed income as well. So over time, there is so much data that actually shows that this is something that long-term oriented investors like pension funds should actually add. So that's the frustrating part. We at Serpentine, actually, we're sponsoring a chair at the IMD in Lausanne on venture capital as an asset class, because we realize that somehow a lot of people don't understand venture capital or private equity in general. And we see how hard it is. And the problem is, if there is no incentives for these pension fund managers to invest into venture capital, it will not happen. So instead of punishing people and saying this, you're not allowed to invest, you should say, if you invest, we might give you some tax breaks. Huh? And this is very un-European. We are more on the saying, okay, we're going to punish you if you do this. If your performance is going to be bad, well, you could argue, say, okay, if you invest a percentage of your assets into venture capital, the returns you get there will not be taxed. That could be an interesting approach. Unfortunately, that's not happening. And I think before this is not happening, not much will change. You see some tendency in the Netherlands where you have that. Some pension funds now have a mandate from their members to invest in regional startups. And you see that sometimes in the Nordics as well. So I hope that, again, talking about best practices, other European countries will look to these countries and say, this is maybe something we should do. And one last word in general, I think that's where Slovenia has a great opportunity. We were talking about problems, but I see this as a great opportunity. You're a nascent ecosystem. You see what's maybe wrong, what could be done better. If you bring that to the table, you have a great opportunity to, again, what we did in 20 years, maybe do it in 7 years.
So, and also this, I think, wraps it around to also the legislative parts, right? So we've mentioned cultural, educational, financial aspects, but also legislation. And Jure, you mentioned before with the renaming of Ars to Aris, with adding the innovation in there. Have you seen also some other kind of legislative moves in the past years to kind of support this innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the first thing that happened was that we changed the model of financing the research institutions and universities in Slovenia. The idea now is that the research institutes or universities they get their money on the table, and they're really independent, more or less independent, what they do with this money. So, but they're obliged to spend some part of this money for so-called development projects, and this is actually where the money comes from for our first proof of concept fund, actually, and the same goes for the others. So this is one thing. The other thing is that the same law finally allows universities to do the spin-offs. Before 2021, it was impossible for the university to be a co-owner of the startups. So that's at least we have it. We have this possibility that there is still on the operational level to sort the things out. But yeah, that's going on. I know that when they have this settled, now the research and innovation agency, they really empower the innovation department. So they have basically open post every week. It's really difficult to get people skilled for the job. I was told I will have this in mind that okay, we have TTO guys here at the research institutes, but we would need also employees at the ministry, at the research agency, that understand the situation, that can really talk with us. And now I think this is also changing now. So they're educating, they're employing the guys that can understand the tech transfer also on the governmental side. So I think, as I said, it will not happen overnight, but I think over a couple of nights, the change can really come.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe slowly wrapping it up. So you're from two different countries with two different perspectives. What kind of encouraging words would you have to up-and-coming, ambitious sci-preneurs? I said it wrong again.
Science-preneurs?
Science-preneurs, exactly. What would you say to them to kind of get them started on the journey?
Well, I think for me, it's very simple because I was, again, been lucky to be part of a successful journey. I've seen lots of other successful science-preneurs. It's the fact that what you invented or you helped invent can eventually have a very positive impact on people's lives. I think this is the best motivation that you can have. And yes, you can actually make a ton of money. And again, that's also okay. That's another issue sometimes we have in Europe, particularly in Switzerland. If you get rich along the way, kind of unethical? Not at all, right? But I think the fundamental motivation is, whether it's in biotech, whether it's in advanced material or mechanical engineering, you do have the potential to change industries and to make people's life better. This is an amazing motivation. And if along the way you make yourself a lot of money, other people will also get rich. That will also be good for society, more tax income, more jobs made. It's so simple to motivate, science-preneurs.
Nothing to add. I just put it in another way. What I suggest the researchers, particularly young researchers, is do the impact-driven research. And it doesn't mean really to commercialize, but do the impact-driven research, change the world. And then if they do this, if they think their research this way, a lot of opportunities open for them, for financing, for collaboration, and that's really a game changer.
I would like to thank you both for attending this podcast and our listeners for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Frank, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.